With CD Projekt Red's very first video game, introducing players to the world of The Witcher, taking on the role of everyone's beloved Geralt of Rivia, 2011 brought yet another continued story of the White Wolf, with a lot being put on his plate in The Witcher 2, Assassins of Kings. A direct sequel to the first game, it stars Geralt in what has to be his most politically involved storyline to date, dealing with the fallout of a previously failed monarch assassination, failing to stop an assassination, and also getting involved in an assassination. Wow, they really weren't kidding with this title. The future of Temeria is the driving force for this Witcher game, alongside Geralt's recovering memory of the Wild Hunt and his beloved Yennefer. Though this is still that game where Triss fans get to have a secured victory. Yes. Yeah. A great game for many mature fantasy heads thanks to its politically charged story, as well as continuing Geralt's amnesiac arc. I remembered trying to get into the Witcher franchise through the second game because of how intriguing and complex the characters were. And, let's face it, Triss Merigold.
Yeah, boy.
I also tried to finish 1 and 2 before 3 came out, but trying to do that in a 3 to 4 day period was not the best idea. But now that I'm older and filled with determination, thank you Siri for being in Witcher 4, it was high time I came back to finally finishing this game. But how does the middle child of the Witcher family play today? With the third title still being a juggernaut of a fantasy open world game and every other recent fantasy RPG title hitting and kind of missing their marks, is the second Witcher game still worth playing through? Taking place after the final scene of the first game, in which an unknown Witcher assassin attempted to take the life of King Foltest, Geralt begrudgingly finds himself as the king's semi-personal bodyguard, and constantly in service to Temeria. But not all is bad, since Yen fans get to be jealous that Triss gets some screen time. Yes! Prior to Geralt's involvement with King Foltest, King Devanvan was assassinated by an unknown individual, spreading fear and doubt into the northern kingdoms, though spreading excitement for the fans since Letho is kind of a badass. Yes, Letho slay! Oh, he's slaying. At the beginning of the game, King Foltest has started a campaign to reclaim his bastard children from the Lavalettes, which also doubles as the game's tutorial section. Geralt is personally involved during the process, aiding King Foltest and his men in sieging the castle and making short work of the opposition. Damn! Also, there's a dragon. Having successfully taken over, King Foltest and Geralt reach the monastery where the children are being kept. Now, while this next plot point is a core part of the game's narrative, if you would prefer to avoid spoilers, please skip here. But technically this person no longer exists if you played the third Witcher game. After a small reunion, Foltest is convinced by the monk to join in prayer, only to end up with a knife to his throat, also revealing that the person is in fact King Demanvan's assassin. Realizing too late, Geralt is unable to act and caught by King Foltest's men, who accuse him of actually being the assassin. A few days later, Geralt is kept in the dungeon of the castle, tortured by Foltest's men, and interrogated by the special forces of the Temerian army, led by one Vernon Roche. Roche, who was also present during the siege, supports Geralt's innocence and helps him escape, ultimately starting his adventure to clear his name, as well as find the culprit behind the whole mess. Cue the title drop! As far as fantasy political narratives go, The Witcher 2 is one of the deepest that I've come across in pretty much any video game that I've seen. I would describe the first and third Witcher games as more all-encompassing, making players feel more connected to the different themes like the nature of actually being a Witcher, seeing the racial tensions between humans and non-humans, monsters and their presence in the world, all that cool Witcher jazz. You still get a good bit of it in this game, but the vast majority of the stories involved are almost politically driven. It's very different in that sense, but it's told with a lot of intrigue that slowly builds and accumulates into Geralt learning about the hows and whys of each party involved.
Temeria is a country one rules with a crown on one's head, or not at all.
A lot of people are out to don that crown.
But few have the right.
I'd say Game of Thrones level of political depth in the narrative, and it can be pretty convoluted when you're trying to learn all of the different kingdoms and characters. Thankfully, this game still includes a codex for you to consult. And if you can't read... Wait, why are you here? The other narrative plot is Geralt's memories as he slowly comes to realize his connection to Yennefer, Ciri, and the Wild Hunt. I enjoyed every bit of it, especially having played the third and first titles, letting me connect the dots on so many different character plots and narratives that span the games, like the buildup of the Nilfgaardian forces being prevalent in the third game, how Yennefer became associated with Ymir, or even how King Radovid rose to power. It's a lot of plot points that deepen your understanding of the era in which Geralt is living. It's also through the characters that make the story highly enjoyable. Geralt's charming as ever personality,
I couldn't give a shit about Henselt. Shillard has Triss, and I need to save her.
Zoltan's dwarven attitude that makes him such a bro.
Look at it this way. You'll be able to brag about seeing the ghostly fog from the inside for the rest of your life.
I'd rather brag about how I ploughed 3 wenches at once in my youth.
Vernon and even Yorvif's sense of justice for their people are what always kept me interested and engaged at every turn.
Hunter of elves, murderer of women and children.
They'll publicly gut you, skin you, and hang you.
Just like that? For nothing?
No, for Temeria.
Even the NPCs are just as world-buildy as the first. A large cast of characters with their own personal goals and agendas that are very true to the mature fantasy world of The Witcher. The other notable aspect that I like was the branching narrative. The biggest one is that you go through half of the game with 2 different characters, and they drastically change how the story is told, even some that are only exclusive to the branch you pick. It makes sense, especially with the sides that you choose, since they both come from very different parties. It also just makes the game much more replayable for a second time, and I actually got to experience the other path that I missed when I first played this game. Why sure, Vess, I'll have a drink with you.
You mean snoo snoo?
Since this Witcher game is focused on the more political climate of the world, it was a bit of a shame that the more actual Witcher side of things, being the hunting and removal of monsters, isn't as heavily focused in this game. It does have some pretty good moments, like the battle with the Keirin, or the curse involving King Henselt, but I did wish for something more substantial. Something akin to curing Ada for the second time in the first game, or the Family Matters quest with the Baron in Witcher 3. But I do concede to the more political focus of the game, and enjoyed it nonetheless. Just a fair warning for those who may have wanted to see more actual Witcher focus. Overall, the best part about the game, and every bit outstanding with the way it delivers its narrative. Also, I wouldn't say it's necessary to know all the events of the first game to understand the second, as well as playing 2 going into 3, but it does frame a lot of character stories that come up in the later games that are worth knowing in the previous. Oh, and it's cool that the game acknowledges your actions from The Witcher 1, thanks to its ability to import saves.
That was true. Foltest's daughter was a Strigga, but I managed to lift the curse, or else Radovid wouldn't have wed her.
It's not quite Mass Effect levels of significant outcomes, nor is it really necessary, but it's great to see that your actions don't go unnoticed in the grand scheme of Temeria's future. This also holds true for going into Witcher 3, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the third game handles my actions. A bit questionable though on whether you should keep that tattoo.
Oh, hell no! I am the pain!
In typical RPG and Witcher fashion, you'll be controlling Geralt as he goes through the different parts of the Northern Kingdom, doing a mix of combat with some very light RPG questing. Also dying, which you may see a lot of. You have the main quest line to progress the story, as well as a good number of side quests that you can perform for some experience, and a few background stories. I enjoyed the majority of the side questing, since the variety includes simple monster slaying, Geralt having to use his fists and sometimes a sword, or trying to investigate a curse. In total though, they don't feel as abundant as the other games, and I did wish there were more monster-related questing. This game does have the same gameplay progression as the first, where quests are specific to each chapter, so you'll have to make sure you're content with how much you complete before you move on. Otherwise, you'll automatically fail them. God damn it! Exploration is also very similar to the first game, where you get to roam the map of each chapter on foot, going from quest to quest. The sections do feel a lot tighter, and most of the instances feel a lot closer together, that walking between them doesn't feel like you're molasses, as Coach Oleander likes to put it.
You're like molasses going uphill in January, with crutches.
I did wish there was a fast travel mechanic to make returning from certain quests a lot easier, but the roll tactic that Link uses in the Ocarina of Time is thankfully very applicable here. The RPG side for Geralt ranges from equipping items and gear to help you have the advantage in combat, to using talent points for various abilities and passives to make Geralt an even scarier Witcher. Actually, he's kind of scary this time, given how bright his yellow glowing eyes are. I'd say it's also a comparable RPG system to the first, but without the funny sword stance focus. Though I still kinda miss Geralt performing capoeira. You also get what is basically the equivalent of gem talents, where you slot mutagens to certain talent skills to add stats like increasing vitality or damage. A good mix with making you pick and choose what preferred equipment and bonuses you want on Geralt, and I was able to make him the fun Dark Souls character that I was forced to make. More on that in a sec. You also get to have the meditate and alchemy system of the first, which is a lot more accessible this time around since you can perform them anywhere without the need for a campfire. Thank the Lord! Though you still have to chug potions while you're meditating, so it kind of feels a little arduous. Now, as for the actual combat, the game decided to do away with the hybrid turn-based third-person hack-and-slash fest and adopt a more proper third-person action one, a system that was more or less retained for The Witcher 3. When I first played this game, I remembered being turned off by the combat because of how clunky and jank the mechanics felt, as well as how slow some of Geralt's abilities were. And playing it again now, it still kinda sucks, especially when there are so many enemies on screen. As much as I wanted to give it a chance again, it's just so hard to see some of the faults that the game has. Geralt taking damage from jank hitboxes, the lock-on being target-specific but not to the camera, meaning that sometimes you can lose track of who Geralt is actually attacking, enemies having an infinite amount of block, and having the faster animations to hit you back. Even your riposte keeps you animation locked, where you still take damage from other enemies. Jesus, why would I ever use this? There's just a lot of things that makes the gameplay feel very disheartening and clunky to want to play. I did use alchemy to help manage my health and resources, but running around just to prolong a fight was even more tedious. But it wasn't so bad since I was given the best advice to play this game, which I would like to describe as a cross between your typical RPG rogue who needs to backstab enemies and your spam roller from Dark Souls. Basically, roll backstab, roll backstab. It feels like such a cheese, but it was literally night and day with how much more manageable combat was. Now, I could be using the signs, throwables, and traps more effectively to help mitigate the mobs, and each of them did feel useful in some capacity, like Axii, Yarden, whatever you pronounce it, and a few other items to help CC enemies. But even then, wanting to use them was so tedious with how long the cast or setup time took. It just feels like the competency to use them all effectively is overshadowed by the fact that you can just spam roll and backstab your way to victory. One-on-ones weren't so bad in general, but my god did the first boss fight with Letho require a certain amount of cheese to win. The fact that his throwables and blocks leave you in long animation stun means that I often died before I could make a dent on his health.
Oh no!
But, as I've said, I was able to cheese him with the Ard sign to stun animation lock him over and over again until the battle was over. Sure, I won, but it kinda just feels a little cheap to do it that way. It also feels like the game is still clinging on to some of its CRPG roots from the first, especially with the whole backstab positioning damage, as well as the literal bottom right box telling you damage numbers and stats. Like, honestly, this is more useful for me in a real-time pause game or turn-based RPG, whereas games like these, which are real-time combat and require my attention on the enemies, this information will kind of just go over my head. Even by the latter half of the game, where combat felt a little easier thanks to the stronger talents, improved signs, and better equipment, it still just didn't feel as effective, and going for backstabs was still the better strategy. It was an okay time with the combat, but it was definitely the aspect about the game that made me roll my eyes way too much. But not enough that it stopped me from wanting to play the game completely. I have the story to thank for that. Honestly, it just made me like the combat system of the first even more, despite how weird and wonderful it was, and I definitely appreciate how much better the third game did it. I hate sounding negative about it, and if the mechanics are actually something you like, then more power to you for enjoying it. But for me, out of all three games, this still felt like the weakest in terms of combat. As far as any other side things go, they also decided to include quicktime events, which aren't bad in the fisticuff matches, and actually feel like fun minigames. But the ones in the cinematics are so out of the blue that I almost broke my mouse and keyboard trying to get my hands back on my desk. Oh shit! Also, dice poker again, Witcher? Seriously? God, I can't wait to play Gwent.
Ooh, who's that handsome devil?
Way back in 2011, when the most prevalent games included Skyrim, Arkham City, and Uncharted 3, there was no shortage of games that really hit their marks for best in visuals. But out of all of them, I definitely thought Witcher 2 was an amazing standout. Fast forward almost 14 years later, The Witcher 2 still looks pretty good for its age. Models don't look half bad, and are still convincing enough to almost be realistic. Though the smoothness and oily sheen on some of the characters make it fall short just a bit. The more intricate details like clothing accessories, armor, and even the pores of each model still makes a big enough difference to hold up. The lip syncing and occasional eyebrow raises to show emotion makes it look better than it should. The main cast get the better treatment in terms of overall design compared to the NPCs, as per usual for nearly every video game out there. But Geralt is easily the most recognizable, as well as the side characters like Triss, Zoltan, and Roach. I'm also glad that Zoltan looks a lot better than he did in the first. Environmental design is also still impressive, especially in contrast to NPCs and characters that are present to populate an area. Military camps look crowded and packed, forests look dense and lush, and even old crumbling ruins like Loch Muin look grey as hell. Seriously, this looks just as dark as my future. Just like The Witcher 1, The Witcher 2 still nails its more realistic medieval fantasy that the world is known for. Obviously with a side of magical and bestial fantasy as well. The city of Flotsam, though not having the same high brow like the richer sections of Vizima, still looks convincing with portraying a small port town that's lively and active. Also brave of them for living near a forest full of monsters. Speaking of, it's the monsters and beasts of The Witcher 2 that further add to its graphical identity. A wide range of monstrous beings are present, from the smaller humanoid types like Neckers and Drowners, more hulkish brutes like trolls that can actually speak to you.
You're drunk.
Vodka good? Head hurt, aye. But no pain in brain.
Just like me, for real, for real. To giant cephalopods like the Karen, there's all manner of monsters that will come to greet Geralt, and they all look very good. The monster variety isn't as abundant compared to the first game, but their visual representation in The Witcher 2 is so much stronger. In fact, some of their designs look like they could fit right into The Witcher 3. Sound on just about every front feels more than appropriate for the setting and mood that The Witcher 2 is trying to achieve. On the effects side, the game sounds distinctly medieval in the way that it portrays large-scale siege battles,
Hail to the king!
swords and shields clashing between fighters, as well as the more natural parts of the world. There's also the whimsical, ethereal, and bestial sounds for the more monstrous and magical portions of the game, which also does a good job in showcasing. Music is definitely a mood setter for nearly all the scenes in the game, ranging from the more jovial and lighthearted tones of a tavern, to the more intense and upbeat action during combat. The major standout though is still the voice acting. While my only minor gripe is how low in volume Doug Cockle sounds for Geralt this time around,
Foltest bastards. The Solar. What happened?
We might have arrived at the same time if not for Tails.
Geralt, just a little louder please. The mannerisms, tonal shifts, and attitudes of literally everybody never misses a beat, and it's the characters and NPCs that bring the setting of The Witcher 2 to life.
Piss off, freak! Or you'll have me to deal with. Think of the common folk, you're spoiling their fun.
Well, freak he may be, but he speaks true. Debauchery's one of my favorite pastimes, but I don't want a noose placed around my neck for pursuing it.
Sorceresses complain about feeling underappreciated, persecuted even. But let me tell you, Geralt, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. If they didn't meddle, they wouldn't be burned at the stake. They keep whining about the horrors that took place on Garnered Island.
I didn't even try.
So I take it you know it was created by a mage.
I guessed as much. And what of it? Do you wish me to feel guilty, apologize for some madman? I don't intend to. How did you know it was a mage?
I didn't. just guessed.
A very good presentation that still has a lot to show for, and one of the very best from 2011.
I hate you! And yet I love you!
The story alone, as well as the presentation to help portray it, are without a doubt the biggest selling points to go back and play The Witcher 2. It's just such a good political drama involving the assassination of monarchs and rulers, and it has a lot of depth to really sink your teeth into. It's a lot different from the first as well as the third, where the stories take a much more personal approach for Geralt, and instead focuses more on the political landscape of Temeria. But it does offer a bigger picture of the level of involvement that Geralt finds himself in. It definitely reminded me of some of the political stories in The Witcher 3, like Radovid or Emir himself and their place in the narrative. But the political climate and Geralt's level of involvement in the second game is another beast altogether, and one that I very much enjoyed. On the other hand though, if gameplay is a bigger deal for you, then The Witcher 2 will leave you wanting. If you're hoping for something along the lines of The Witcher 3, it's kinda there, but you can see how much the third game vastly improved on what the second tried to do. I think it can feel like a fun hack and slash fest when it needs to be, but it never feels right with the way enemies are designed, and the way Geralt's kit just feels too slow to react. If combat is the deal breaker, but the story is the selling point, then just turning on easy mode and coasting through the combat is the better recommendation, because as far as narrative world building for The Witcher is concerned, the second game is an amazing one to hear, down to its smallest details and all the way up to its biggest plot points. A politically charged story that holds up very well, alongside some old but nice graphics to help tell it. I'd say it's one of the adventures of Geralt worth hearing, especially if you're a fan, not to mention its eventual build up to The Witcher 3, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that game also holds up. But that's gonna do it for today guys, thanks for sticking around. There will be more games to play and more videos coming soon, so please stay tuned if you'd like to see more. But for now, I'll see you all next time.